So Keffe D provides the information to you guys. He walks away from these drug charges and these murder charges, essentially.
The murder charge.
The murder charge, right. What happens with Keffe D after that?
He goes about his business. He becomes kind of persona non grata to a certain degree.
What does that mean?
You know, he's got, once people in his neighborhood find out that he's cooperated, he's, you know, loses some of his, you know, the tarnish on his reputation. He begins to even have some conflict internally with members of his gang who know that he's, you know, given up his nephew and given up other Southside Crips like Terrence Brown and DeAndre. And so he's, you know, has to deal with that. But Keffe D's, you know, he's a street gangster, and he deals with things, you know, in a street manner. So he continued to just, you know, go about his business and his life like he always had, until he got caught with a gun and some dope, and he was charged, and then he was at large for a while until he was picked up on those charges, and then went to prison. And I think he got 14 months, but he's recently been released.
Okay. Well, was Keffe D still living in Compton at the time? Or, well, I guess he was living in Riverside when you guys approached him, so he wasn't really in Compton anymore.
Correct. He was living his family and, you know, his home away from home, so to speak, was out in Riverside. But he has family back in Compton. His neighborhood's back in Compton, in the Southside Crip neighborhood. And so, you know, he gravitates towards there naturally because that's where he grew up, that's where his friends are, and that's where he conducts his business.
Okay. But there is a tension now with Southside and his family in terms of what he
There's issues. I'm sure the family doesn't appreciate what he did, but ultimately they have to understand that what he did was protecting them also. We had other members of his family that had been wrapped up in this drug ring. And so by cooperating with us, he protected them from being charged also. So it's a double-edged sword for him. They probably look at him with a, you know, a skeptical eye because he threw his nephew under the bus, but at the same time, you know, he protected them from going to prison.
Okay. And Keffe D now is out of prison.
That's
as far
right.
as you know.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you picked up the case, was Orlando still alive?
No, by the time I picked up the case in 2006, Orlando had already been dead nearly 8 years.
Okay, so you weren't involved in any of the stuff after it happened?
Well, I wasn't involved in real time, but an investigation goes backwards just as often as it goes forward. So we have to go back and evaluate everything that we know happened in history in order to catch up with the times and move forward.
Now, Orlando ended up testifying on Suge's behalf during Suge's trial?
That's right. He perjured himself in order to assist Suge Knight get out from under his probation violation.
Okay. And why do you think Orlando Anderson testified on Suge's behalf after Suge is on video jumping him?
He did it for one simple reason. He was getting paid to do it.
Okay. Do you know how much he got paid to do it?
It was either $16,000 or $60,000, depending on what source you talk to.
Okay. But in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Correct.
After Orlando testified on Suge's behalf, what became of the relationship between the Southside Crips and the Mob Piru?
Things didn't change between the crews. I mean, their rivalries, regardless of their associations with, you know, Suge Knight or Bad Boy, they're Bloods and Crips. And so just by the very nature of that opposition, they're going to be at odds. But once all of the conflicts started between Death Row and Bad Boy, it really kind of exacerbated that situation. And you know, it was a shoot on sight type of environment for both of those crews.
But what's your take on Suge's current situation?
I think Suge has a pretty good defense in his current criminal matter. I think he has a good self-defense situation. But this is just more of Suge being Suge, pressing up on people, creating conflicts. He has this kind of false sense of reality that he's not the king of the streets anymore, and he expects people to pay dues and dividends to him for for favors done in the past. And it's just by the nature of how Suge Knight conducts business, and the trouble's always going to follow him.
But from your professional standpoint, you think that he might actually get off?
I think he has a really good chance of getting off on a self-defense defense. And clearly you see the video that works in his favor to a certain degree. Some of the statements of the witnesses, including Claybone, that works in his defense. So he has a good chance. Remember, you've got to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. Why do you think the bail was set at such an astronomical number? What was it, like 25 million to begin with, which was like, this is like Unabomber numbers.
Yeah. The prosecution was able to establish that Suge Knight was a threat to the community, and that because of his history and what we know about Suge Knight, there was a high probability that he would reach out and either try to dissuade or coerce witnesses or harm witnesses. And so there was a community issue, a community safety issue, and then there was also concerned about a flight risk. So that's one of the reasons that they were able to successfully argue for such a high bail amount.
Are you going to be pulled into this trial at all, you think? Or?
I don't know. I don't know what to expect with this. We did develop a lot of information that works against Suge during our task force investigation. At the same time that we were conducting our murder investigations of Biggie and Tupac, we were also conducting a federal racketeering investigation of Suge Knight in the defunct death row records. So we developed a lot of information that I can see the prosecutor wanting to use to discredit Suge Knight and to kind of help develop for the jury the kind of character he is.
Sometimes in the criminal system, you have situations like, for example, the O.J. situation. O.J. was sentenced to 33 years in prison for showing up, trying to get his stuff back from someone who he felt had stolen his stuff. I've heard of murderers getting less than 33 years. Number one, do you feel that O.J., based on your professional opinion, do you feel that 33 years was a reasonable amount of time based on O.J.'s crime?
Probably not a reasonable amount of time based on that particular crime, but it certainly would be a reasonable amount of time based on the evidence that he committed murder. I know that the two can't be necessarily overlapped, but sometimes it's karma. And I think that potentially people in a position to pass judgment, such as the judge in that case, may have been motivated to set justice straight, and giving him so much time.
But that is illegal, isn't it?
For a judge, there's not a lot of things illegal for judges.
Okay.
They kind of write the law. So.
Well, no, not necessarily.
You're not supposed to take past crimes into consideration or allegations of past crimes into consideration. So you can take prior convictions into consideration when you're sentencing, but things happen in court all the time that can be viewed as inappropriate.
Do you think that in the Suge situation, you could potentially see the same type of thing, where he might be found guilty of maybe a lesser crime, but they give him an inflated sentence based on things that they felt he may have done in the past?
Well, they're apples and oranges, Suge Knight and O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson was not a convicted criminal. O.J. Simpson doesn't have multiple felony convictions in his history. So those, like I was saying, those do come into consideration when you're passing sentence. So because Suge has a pretty extensive criminal history, that'll play against him if he gets convicted.